Welcome to Your Lot and Parcel podcast with your host, Benjamin Diaz, designed strictly for you, the consumer. You will find that this platform has your best interests at heart.
Welcome to this episode. This is Benjamin Diaz, your host. We will be spending time with a professional appraiser, much like the North Star guided the mariners throughout the ages to traverse the open seas. This gentleman is going to guide us through the process of what goes into a home appraisal to form an opinion of value, which incidentally are principles that are applied across the country. He has performed approximately 15,000 appraisals, obviously very seasoned gentleman, as the owner of North Star Appraisal Services. Come along with me and let's meet John Grichine. Hello there, John. Thank you for being our guest here today. I appreciate you taking time to discuss the appraisal industry to us a little bit. So, John, if you'd be so kind to tell us about your company or your organization, if you could do that for us to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. So the company is North Star Appraisal Services. I started this back in 2006, shortly after getting licensed, after about 2 years being a trainee, working for my mentor here in South Orange County. Mm-hmm. And North Star, the name North Star actually was the idea of my former partner. And we got a website going, some obviously like business cards and all that. So at that time I was pretty young. I was only about 25, 26. Mm-hmm. This has been my first real profession out of college, my first real job. So still kind of green between the ears. But the biggest problem back then was, a year or two after we got started, we had the big recession, the housing crisis. So it was tough going in the beginning. I'll fast forward a little bit to the last few years. Obviously, the market's recovered, and I've got 4 trainees now that work for me. One just got licensed recently, so 3 active trainees. One woman who works kind of as a contractor with me on a fee split basis. So there's basically myself and 4 other junior appraisers that I have under my wing, and they're all older than me. They all have more life experience than me. I'm 38, and all my trainees are in their 50s or older. So it's kind of a unique experience, man. Yeah, managing people with a lot more life experience and than myself, and some of them have even more education background as me, like a master's in music, and one of them has an MBA. So it's definitely, I guess, I'm fortunate to have such experienced associates working with me. But anyway, so we do mostly Orange and LA County valuations. We do commercial and residential appraising, as well as industrial properties. We also offer consulting services, consulting in form of if somebody's looking to maybe list their home. We can do like analysis of the market and let them know if it's a good time to list, kind of what the ballpark value they can get for their home, etc. So we try to do as much as we can in that valuation arena to help our clients for many reasons. Obviously, the main one, to make money, right? We want to come to us for various needs.
Sure.
So, like I said, we cover Orange and LA counties predominantly, but sometimes we do venture out in Riverside, San Diego, and San Bernardino counties down here.
Yeah. Very good. I do love the name of your organization, North Star. That's I love that. I really do. But I believe that's what the mariners used to traverse the open seas, right?
Yes.
North Star was always trustworthy. It's always dependable. Yes. So I like that. I really do. It's a good metaphor. Very good metaphor. So, John, tell us what goes into a home appraisal to form an opinion on value. Can you walk us through the mechanics on that?
Yes. So, I mean, we most of us have heard the phrase location. So that's the first thing we look at when doing an appraisal for a property. And that's the same whether it's residential, commercial, industrial. So obviously a property on the coastline will be worth, all else being equal, a lot more than something out in the desert, a lot more inland. So with my home base being here in Irvine, I do a lot of evaluations on the beach cities like Newport Beach, Laguna Beach. So location near the water, near the coast is generally, most preferred. So again, when we're valuing properties in this area, we look at location. Then we'll look at the construction quality and condition of a home. Obviously, custom homes, high-end homes, semi-custom, those are generally worth more than just a regular tract home. People like to live in something that's unique, right? We have outside of real estate, we have people that collect cars, watches, right? Art. It's always good to have something that's like 1 out of 300, 1 out of 500, right? You have something that's very limited. So with real estate, similar. If you have a custom home designed by some architect, you have one of a kind. So, that's also very important on the list. And then obviously condition, size of the building, size of the lot, views. And there's no really particular order where those come in, like what's more important, size of the lot or condition, or views or condition. Generally, outside of location, the other factors can be switched around in order depending on the market, depending on the type of property. So it's us appraisers that determine, well, what's the next important feature for this home? Yes, it's located in the gated community near the ocean, but what's more of a value added feature here? The size of this building, the custom nature of the home, the views. So that's where the experience of appraisers come in. And then, the job is to pick the most similar sales in the area to compare to our property. Homes that have the most similar views, location, etc. So that's kind of a rough rundown of that.
Let me ask you, how do you go as far as a radius to look for comps?
Well, that depends on a few factors. Like most government agencies, like Fannie Mae, FHA, they have guidelines that allow you to go up to 1 mile in most suburban areas. If you're in a rural community, you can go further out. If you're like in a high density urban area, and then half a mile is usually what's used. So again, that's for us as appraisers to determine. I'm doing work for a non-lending client, let's say for the estate for somebody or for tax purposes.
Yes.
If I'm in a high density area, somewhere in Orange County or in LA, I try to stick within 2/3 or 3/4 of a mile. I feel that's a good radius to go out. But again, that could be pushed depending on the type of and the client.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see, because underwriters will look at that real close, to see are these comparables, can we use them? I'm sure you've had that question come up at times with underwriters going through the appraisal desk and so forth. But what if the subject property is so unique? I mean, how do you find comps for something like that? What would be the approach there?
Well, I have appraised unique properties over the years. Dome-shaped homes. Homes are overbuilt for the area.
Oh yeah.
Basically, I was just thinking about that when I was getting ready for this podcast. I've never ever had a property, and I've appraised over 15,000 homes in my career, whether as a trainee working with my mentor or personally. So, I've never came across a property that I couldn't find comps. It's just a matter of pushing the criteria, pushing the boundaries that you're willing to look. Sometimes maybe you have to go 10, 15 miles out. Sometimes you have to go back 5 years out. There will be something that's sold somewhere that's remotely comparable. Sure, there might be homes. Again, I don't discard the fact there may be a home that really has no comps. Some unique tree house somewhere out in the mountains.
Absolutely,
yeah. But I've never personally came across a property that I couldn't find something remotely similar. Within 5-10 miles, maybe a few years back. You just have to keep pushing that envelope, going further out, going to maybe another county. going back 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
But if all else fails, the valuation methodology or valuation logic suggests using the cost approach. Basically, well, what would it cost to build a home, similar to this? So then you would have to find, vacant land sales, estimate the value of land, and then construction costs. So if all else fails, you can use the cost approach to arrive at a value opinion for something that's, if it's so unique, there's really just nothing out there that even comes close.
Mm-hmm. The cost approach, that would be what an insurance company would use. Is that the rule of thumb?
Yes,
To
some of my
rebuild,
clients.
to rebuild a home.
Yes,
Right.
and I've had some clients, insurance companies. A real life example, or a real example that I've had recently. State Farm, I believe State Farm or Farmers hired me last year. Remember we had those fires,
Oh, yes.
all over California, and here we go again with fire season. So one of these big insurance agencies contacted me to do a valuation on the property that was burned down in the fire, and they wanted me to use the cost approach as well to separate the value of the land from the improvements, because they wanted to know how much value was lost to the building being burned down, because land doesn't depreciate, and you can't really insure land, right? So the company insured the improvements. So they had me do an appraisal and separate the cost of all the improvements, right? The dwelling, the garage, if there's patio, etc., versus just the value of land. So you're right. Insurance companies, sometimes for tax purposes, also, I've had clients ask me to break down the cost or the value of land versus improvements for like depreciation purposes, taxation purposes. So it's definitely an important approach to value. And like we just discussed, sometimes it's the only approach if the property is so unique. There's just nothing out there that's sold.
Good, very good. So there's a way to work yourself through that, and that's great. And sounds like you've had some challenges though along the way.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. So let's look at a little closer when you do inspect a home. Um, what do you look for as far as conditions and the framework or the structure and that sort of thing? Driveway, walkways. What do you look at?
Well, I look at many things, and by now I'm fairly seasoned
Sure, yes.
doing this. Started in 2003 with about 17 years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So curb appeal, is definitely important.
Oh, yes.
I try to look at the property through the eyes of potential buyer or
There
investor.
you go.
If
Yeah.
I'm pulling up to a property doing appraisal, I try to see, well, what is the first thing someone's going to see when they come to look at this property? How's the lawn? How's the driveway? Are there any
Mm-hmm.
cracks? Um, what is the curb appeal of this particular property? And then again, you have to look at the nature of the property. Is it conforming to the neighborhood? Is it overbuilt? Is the neighborhood predominantly, 2-story Mediterranean homes, and here you have this ranch home? So does it conform to the neighborhood? Does it kind of stand out? Does it stand out in a good or a bad way? Is the home custom? Is it not? So certain things add value in some market areas and some things don't. The most simple example is, pool in the spa. Here in Southern California, it generally adds value. If you have a pool in the spa in Chicago and Minnesota,
All
it
right.
probably has no value, right? How many
Nope.
months out of the year are you going to use it? Just like with solar panels. Solar panels here in South Orange County and most of Southern California, they add value. If you put solar panels in Seattle or even San Francisco, that may not give you much value. It may even detract value from some liability or
Yes.
maintenance, standpoint. So there's all those things you have to look at, as well as, the layout of the property. Like, I do a lot of valuations in 55 and older communities. Those
Mm-hmm.
communities predominantly have one-story homes because older folk, they don't want to climb up and down the stairs.
Yes.
So if you have a 2-story home in a senior community, that may detract from value because it's not going to be conforming to what that market, what that 55 and older community, accepts. So a lot of those things, again, you have to really look at as a valuation expert and see, well, 2-story home in the senior community with predominantly single-story homes,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a good characteristics for this property.
Yes.
So yeah, and porches, patios, decks. Also, they factor in, like, if you have a property that has great views, let's say ocean views or lake views, you want that property to have a deck or a patio to enjoy those views. If a property doesn't have something like that where you can enjoy the property fully, enjoy those views and recreation areas, like in the backyard or balcony, again, that detracts from value, especially if the majority of the neighborhood has those features in the property. They can enjoy, those attributes and characteristics of that neighborhood, views and etc.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's I can see what you're looking for there. Anything that can contribute toward the enjoyment of that property. That's good. And by the way, what comes to mind here, once you make or you provide a certified appraisal, an official appraisal, how long would you say that appraisal is good for? What would you say typically?
Typically 6 months, but
6 months. Okay.
that depends. Again, that depends on
On the
the
market and so
intended
forth.
use. Well, the market, yes, it's the market changing, but also on the intended use of the appraisal.
Okay.
So, who is this for? Who requested it? What purpose is the appraisal serving? Because nobody ever gets an appraisal done for no reason. In fact, whenever I get a phone call from a new client or from any client, I say, what is the intended use? What is the purpose of this valuation? Nobody ever tells me, I don't know. I just want one done. I've never, ever had that response. Somebody always has a purpose that this appraisal will fill. So again, that depends on what the purpose is. But generally speaking, 6 months, Ben. Generally, the first 6 months.
Very good, because I can hear what you're saying there, because I have ordered appraisals, and on properties that I've invested into, and I use it as a selling tool, and that's letting people know, what the price of eggs are, and that sort of thing. So that I've used that as a tool. Of course, a guy can come up with a CMA or a comparative market analysis, but no, I think an official appraisal carries much credibility, and there's more preponderance to what you're asking for as far as a price, So no, I agree with you. So let's say you find yourself inside of a home and you're looking at the condition, and it's in superb condition. However, the home, you got different odors, pet odors, and I have bought property with cigarette smoke has just permeated everything. Does that impact value from your perspective?
Yes, it definitely does. I mean, as appraisers, we're trained and we're almost required to look past the personal items or clutter, or let's say,
Yes.
like, I've appraised many homes of hoarders before, right? And we have to look past that because it's just personal stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
Boxes, newspapers, whatever. So an odor is a little bit tricky, a little bit more tricky, odor and the smell. Can you easily move that out? Like, let's say a hoarder has a million boxes in the house. You can easily take those, right? Hire a company, carry them out. I mean, yes, there's an expense involved with it, but it doesn't detract from the property. If you just take all that stuff out, you still have a property, with relative decent condition. If it's not, run down, with its location, etc. But with the smell, and I've replaced many homes with like cigarette smells or cat, odors. It's a little bit tricky. It takes time, effort, and money to get rid of that. So if the smell is really bad and it's everywhere, I make an adjustment for condition. I kind of factor that into the condition of the property, because when you clear the property out, let's say you move everything out, right, all your personal stuff, the smell will generally linger. Sometimes it can linger for years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So something like that, I definitely would, detract from the property's value. How much? It depends on, again, the area of the market, how bad the smell is, how big the property is. So it depends on a few factors.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. You make a smell adjustment on that.
Well, yeah. Yes. And actually, a true story. I've appraised a home once years ago, about let me see, probably 8, 9 years ago. It was in a senior community, 55 and over community here in Costa del Sol in Mission Viejo, South Orange County. And the lady had about 25 cats.
Oh, my.
She was like a true cat lady. You know, it reminds me of that episode from The Simpsons, right? So she was like a true, bona fide cat lady here. And the smell was so bad, I had to go outside every couple of minutes just to breathe. It was really bad. And I remember even asking her, like, how many cats do you have? And she goes, well, there were 25, but I think some of them have reproduced. There's probably more now. So there was cats everywhere. They ran the house. And I had to make an adjustment because the house was in relatively bad condition. It was run down, but there was smell, there were stains, right, from these animals, from the cats. And it was just so bad I couldn't breathe in there. And I knew even if all that was removed, let's say she moved out and she moved her cats out, that smell would stay with the house. It would take a lot of time, money to get rid of that. So I made a pretty significant adjustment for those factors.
There you go. Yeah, because I can see that you have to remove carpet if it's necessary, and just
carpeting down to the you would have to remove not only the carpeting, you would have to repaint the walls. You would have to even like the subfloor. Sometimes if the carpet's over like the original hardwood, you may even have to go down and remove that subfloor underneath the carpet. Remove the baseboards, crown moldings if they're there, because wood can have the smell seep into it. So you may have to remove a lot more than just carpet to get rid of that smell.
My goodness. Okay. Well, that's good to know for our listenership. To keep an eye on those things if they ever decide to sell. My other question: how much scrutiny do you provide or give to sheds and outbuildings on a piece of property?
Well, that's an interesting question, Ben. So, in fact, I had recently somebody contacted me on Yelp. She was asking if an ADU, ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit, if that would add value to her home, and if so, how much? So, a traditional storage shed, let's say it's like 8x8 or 8x6, I usually make an adjustment of like $1,000 or $2,000, all else being equal. But you have to look at to see, well, is the shed going to stay with the property? Is it part of the real estate, or is it more of like a personal property? Which is similar to how I look at like an above ground spa, right? Those jacuzzis you can order, they get delivered. That's borderline between personal property and part of the real estate. Sure, if they're like built in to the home with, or to the lot with like, foundation, or if it's really built into the property, then it will give it some value, because generally it does add value, right? Like a storage shed, you can store your lawnmower in there or some, some boxes. So depending on the market and the condition and size of this feature, I will give some value to storage sheds, outbuildings, right? In some of these more rural areas, you have like stables, you have barns, you have workshop sheds, right? Tool sheds. So they generally do add value to those properties, because they have some some usability. Somebody can use them. Even if, let's say, you bought a house and there was like a big tool shed, even if you're not a mechanic yourself, you can probably use it for something else, right? You can store something in there, or at least it can be like an additional storage, or you can convert it to like detached office. So generally speaking, I give some value to those structures, but that depends on their condition, their size. Are they really built into the property, or are they movable? Are they mobile? Can you just easily take it and move it? Which is also similar with accessory dwelling units with ADUs. Are they? Also, first of all, is the improvement permitted? Because sometimes people add an additional square footage or structure to the property, but most cities and counties, they want you to get a permit for any kind of additions. So if something's been added to the property but it's not permitted, I may give it no value at all, because if there's no permits, you don't know if it's been done in a workmanlike manner, you don't know if it's safe, you don't know if it's to code.
Mm-hmm.
And some municipalities will fine you if you have additions that are not permitted. Some of them will send you a fine, say, hey, look, get this, get rid of this structure, or, have us come out to sign off on it, pull some permits, or, get rid of it. So,
yes.
Again, it depends on quite a few factors, whether I give any value to something and how much value.
I can appreciate that. And I've been, seen cases where it's just better off to demolish the darn thing, and because there's no value, it becomes more of a liability, when with some sheds, So yeah, I just got to look at it from all angles on that. And by the way, you mentioned a workman like manner. So these appraisals are they as is, or do you recommend other professionals to look at maybe a potential issue with the structure and that sort of thing?
Generally, most appraisals are as is.
Okay.
I don't remember a situation I got asked that in court um, for an
Right.
appraisal I did, and then involved some litigation, and I was testifying.
Yeah.
And I think one of the attorneys asked me, well, is it true that most appraisals are completed as is? And I said, yes, they generally are. So let's say something is there, the property, but there's no permits. Like, let's say an improvement, like, I don't know, a converted patio was done. So they
Yes.
enclosed the patio, made it into a sunroom, but there were no permits pulled. So I'll have to take a look and see from a trained eye, does this conform to the market? Does this look like it's going to fall apart tomorrow if a small storm comes? But since I'm not a general contractor, I'm not a home inspector, I
Right.
can't be sure. So I always recommend, homeowners, if they bought a property with an improvement, I tell them, this looks fine, but maybe hire a contractor, have somebody come out and take a look at this.
Yeah. Okay.
The workmanlike matter, again, just means that it's done by qualified professional. This is sound.
Exactly.
This is safe.
Very
This
good.
is not going to be a burden or a safety issue on this property, and it will pass the city, the codes, the city inspections. So that's generally how I look at workmanlike matter, which is again a term fairly common that the lenders use. In fact, sometimes when I'm doing an appraisal and I mention an addition, the lender wants got comments in there. Is this addition done in a workmanlike matter or is it not? So it's a common term they throw around for improvements that were added on to.
Yes, very good. We are enjoying the company of John Grichine, a professional appraiser and owner of North Star Appraisal Services. And he's helping us to appreciate what goes into an appraisal. So, when you purchase a home, isn't it true that you not only purchase that home, but you're also purchasing the neighborhood? So let's say next door to that home there, you have a clunker of a car and grown overgrown lawn, and and the car sits right in the middle of the yard. I mean, and the yard goes up to adjacent to your yard, which is manicured and meticulous. How do you look at that?
Well, yes, you're correct. When you're buying a home, you're buying a neighborhood. I mean, I've seen shacks sell for $1 million because they're a nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
Laguna Beach, and I've seen big, giant mansions sell for pennies on the dollar because they're in a bad area that's going through some, decline, or going through some trouble, or some decline in income and marketability and appeal. So when I'm appraising a home and it has, an eyesore next door, like you mentioned, a clunker of a car in the driveway, and just run down landscaping, of course that will detract from the subject property, because again, I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody buying this property. So say I buy this property, and then every day I have to look at this eyesore next door, right? And that usually also comes with, other factors. Somebody who's living like that with a rundown landscape and etc. Those type of people are generally not, what's the best way to say it here? They're not the most friendly, or maybe bright, or professional, right? Or responsible people. Sometimes there may be, drug activity on the property. Sometimes there may be some other crime. Sometimes you get suspicious characters coming by late at night making noise. Those are not the most, respectable people that live like that with just really rundown house, uh, rusting away cars and other things that we can imagine. And I'm sure that, the listeners that listen to this maybe have some neighbors or know people with neighbors like that. So I definitely deduct from a property that is next door to, properties like this that are really run down, because it is a nuisance. It is an inconvenience. It is, a loss of value and enjoyability of your home when you live into somebody like that versus if you live next door to, a respected individual, an individual that takes care of their property and doesn't let it run down, and you don't have to look at an eyesore every day. So I definitely do. How much an adjustment again varies from market to market, property to property, but generally I will make an adjustment downward for those, to those kind of properties.
Good. And over the years, I have acquired property, and like I indicated earlier, I sometimes order an appraisal, an official appraisal, and by far, John, I want you to know, by far, the buyer is related to next door. So I always go go to next door or across the street or on the block. There's always a family member that wants to be nearby.
Yes.
So that kind of takes off the pressure. I remember I'll tell you one, I'll recount this to you. I went to one fellow next door. So he was interested, obviously. He invites me in for a cup of coffee. And unfortunately, my better half was with me, so I couldn't get in too much trouble, right? So I walk in there, I ambled in there and sat down, and he offered me a cup of coffee. And he goes to the other room and comes back with a cup of coffee, and I sipped it just slightly to see, because I'm kind of a cynic, by nature. And obviously, he had put something in it, and I want you to know it tasted good.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that cup of coffee. He offered me a second. So what he was trying to do is soften the negotiation process, right? That he couldn't fool me. So he offered me a second cup of coffee, and my excuse, well, it's cold outside, so why not?
Yeah.
But you know what? I still walked out of there with my original price. But I believe I had an appraisal in hand. You see, so whoever's listening, if you want to sell a property, get an appraisal, because that carries a lot of weight. And he didn't think, I think he bought it for his daughter. And by far, that's how I've sold some of the properties I have acquired over the years. Just talk to the person next door. And if their lifestyle is like what we just described, where they're messy and so forth, well, the relatives already knows them all about that, right? So
yes,
it's not a barrier. So no, I do appreciate those thoughts. Okay,
well,
go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to add one other comment. You just
Yes.
made me think of something you're, saying. You were, you had a couple of cups of coffee, and certain gestures make us want to, do, purchase something. It's like when you go buy a car, right? What do? They bring you coffee, they do this,
Yeah.
they try to pamper you, get you a popcorn, right? So I've had in my experience, especially if I'm doing a property for a sale, a purchase, right? Let's say, which happens quite often, an all-cash buyer will hire me to do an appraisal because they want to do due diligence.
Right.
And I had this many times, I can even probably count or think about in my head all these situations what I've had. So a person paying all cash doesn't need an appraisal from the bank, right? Because there's no bank involved. Mm-hmm. It's an all cash deal. So they'll hire an appraiser to do an appraisal, make sure the value is good. So I remember a couple instances I would show up to the property, and the listing agent who's trying to sell this property, they will be trying to, like, influence me by saying, oh, I do a lot of work in this area. I'm sure I can give you a lot more business. This property is definitely worth, whatever it is, 2-3 million, whatever it's, they listed. But they'll try to sway me or bias me, persuade me into coming in higher. And like I said, some of the tactics are additional business. I've had one guy say, "Oh, there's a lot of gated communities here. I know all the associations. I can get you into any gated communities for comps or whatever." Um, or, "Oh, I have this good partnership with this bank. They can send you a lot more work." So I tell you, it never fails me with these uh, new ways some of these agents and other vested parties in the transactions will try to persuade me to to appraise the property at a favorable value to them.
Oh yes.
And so I completely understand what you were saying.
Oh yeah.
Somebody was trying to give a cup of coffee and warm you up. I get that
warm me
quite a
up
bit.
with something in it. It might have been a little bit of Southern Comfort probably in there. But hey, by the way, let me make it clear. I walked out of there. I didn't stumble out of there. Okay, I just want to make sure you understood that. So how about this this point here? If something maybe has happened that's maybe unpleasant or something violent happened in that home, what comes to mind back in the Charles Manson, with Sharon Tate, that home, that what took place in that home. I think of the Heaven Gates massive
Oh yes,
suicide, and what was it, Rancho Santa Fe? I mean, how do you
yeah.
handle something like that,
Was in,
John?
was in San Diego County, I think, right?
Yeah, as it was.
So what was your question, Ben?
So how do you handle the value? I mean, is there a repercussion on value in getting the?
Yes, I mean there is a stigma associated with
Yes,
properties like that,
yes.
and um, generally speaking, well, for personal experience, I've never appraised properties
Hmm.
with murders
Okay.
or big, huge suicide
Yes.
situations like from this clan. I have appraised properties with individual suicides. I've done a few of those
Hmm.
where somebody committed suicide in the property. So generally speaking, you have to try to find a property that's sold in the area that had a similar, it's called,
Oh,
the term is stigma, right? Similar
yeah.
event that happened that will detract from the value of the property, right? Stigma.
Right.
If there is no such property that's sold, then you just make a educated educated adjustment. So
Right.
as appraisers, we're trained to factor in and just make an educated guess of what something could have an effect on value. Again, ideally, we have to extract that from the market. Like I'll give you an example. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people ask me, well, how much does a garage add to a property? So let's say you have two exact properties, almost identical. The only difference is one has a 2-car garage, one 3-car garage. Usually I can look at the market and see, well, look, the properties are selling at about $10,000 more with a 3-car garage versus a 2-car garage, all else being equal. So I know I can extract the value of a garage from comps, from sales, and say, look, here's data that supports a garage is an additional 3rd-car garage adds about 10 grand. So ideally, that's what you want to do with something like this. You have to look at sales that had a mass suicide happen. But how many of properties like that do we know, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
happen very often,
Yeah.
thank God for obviously for good reasons it doesn't.
Yeah.
But if we can't extract that contributory or detracting value from the market, we have to make an educated guess.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, if there is like this last real example I've had with a suicide, my client's father hung himself in this property, and he was getting the property done for the estate.
Mm.
So I subtracted, I think it was 3 or 4% off the top. So I think it was roughly a $500,000 home. So I subtracted about 20,000,
Mm-hmm.
15, 20,000 from my value painting just for that factor alone, just for that,
Yes.
um, unfortunate event that somebody committed suicide in this property. Now,
Yeah.
natural death from natural causes, I generally don't
Yeah. That's a
suggest them
different.
at all. If somebody just died in their sleep or whatnot,
Right.
but suicide, murder, if it's a drug house, right? You have
All
meth
right.
labs, or I've appraised the last year house that they grew marijuana in the garage and everywhere, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just smelled. Something like that, you also make an adjustment because it has a negative stigma, and obviously it's not a very good
Yeah.
home to be living in. Imagine you have a family with little kids and you move into a drug house, right? It's
All right.
not a good situation. So for those situations, I definitely make an adjustment And like I said, I try to look to see if there's something in the market where I can extract that multiplier or that percentage increase or decrease. Obviously for stigma, it's a decrease in value. So I try to extract that and attribute it to the valuation I'm doing, but it's not always available. So then I just use my, best judgment from my experience.
Sure. I guess it's just relative. You get somebody that's really sensitive to, I don't know, about buying that property, what took place. And you get somebody else that, I think it's a bargain.
Yeah.
So it's very subjective, very subjective. But that's how it is. But if I was the owner, I'd just give it a complete makeover, paint it, give it a different look, try to mitigate the stigma as much as possible. But sometimes, it lingers for a while. That stigma.
But that comes with the cost, right? That comes with the cost to you with time, effort, right? Stress, money. Right. So that costs you. Most of us don't want to do too much work to a house, but you're buying a house with those things. You mentioned you can repaint it or doing something, but that comes with the cost,
right?
Time, stress, money, etc. So, which detracts then from value because now you have to exert effort bringing this home up to par to what it should have been if it wasn't for those negative attributes.
Right. Yeah. Boy, that's good. There's lots to think about, and I appreciate your thoughts on that. At this point, would you be so kind to relate your thoughts on the condition of the real estate market there in Southern California, John?
Well, I've actually, our company we've been more busy now than we were before this pandemic started.
Wow.
For a few main reasons.
Good for you.
Number one, divorces are up. Well, again, not in this particular order. Number one, I don't mean this is the most important. I'm just kind of listing the reasons. The divorces are up, right? People living together, getting sick of each other. So in a divorce, if there's property involved, you need to get appraised and sold. So we're doing appraisals for divorces. BKs are up, right? People losing their jobs.
Right.
So we're doing appraisals for BKs. Interest rates, all-time low. A lot of people refi.
Absolutely.
So we're doing a lot more work and a lot more valuations. And what I'm seeing is the market is going up in one segment, going down in another, and in another segment is just kind of flat. So I'm seeing the high-end market, the high-end in this area in SoCal is generally $1.5 million, $1.75 and up. So that market is kind of stagnant and even going down in some areas. The $1.25 million and below market is selling pretty hot. I've even seen prices going up in that low to mid-range market in Orange and parts of LA County, which to be honest, I was a little bit surprised. I thought that when the pandemic was going to hit, that real estate is going to be dropping, at various percentages, but I thought real estate will be dropping at pretty much all levels. That is not the case. And a lot of my clients who are investors and real estate agents, they're seeing the same thing. A lot of these homes in under $1.25 million are going up. But the super high end, like 4 or 5 million and up, now, that's sinking like the Titanic, because it's hard to obtain financing. The jumbo loans, a lot of banks aren't doing jumbo loans. A lot of people are scared. People with that kind of money are usually smart, right? I've rarely met a multimillionaire or somebody buying a home for 4 or 5 million, who's not intelligent at all, a stupid person. Usually those people are fairly educated.
Very sophisticated.
For money. So they know, they follow the market. They don't make bad decisions usually. And a lot of those people are being careful right now. They're being, they're waiting and seeing. Like I have some clients that are looking to buy homes in the $3 and $4 million range, and they're waiting right now. They want to see this pandemic end. They want to see the election go by. So they're sitting on the sidelines. So when you have a lot of people or potential buyers sitting on the sidelines, and then you have a lot of inventory, it's a basic principle, economics 101, supply and demand, right? When the supply goes up and the demand goes down, prices will drop. So the supply is, if anything, it's going up in that high-end market. People trying to sell their high-end homes, cash in on that equity, maybe downsize, move into a less expensive home. Maybe if they lost their jobs or the businesses, they're trying to minimize their expenses, right? Live in the smaller homes. So the inventory of high-end homes is going up, and their demand is going down, and that's bringing the prices in that high-end market down. At least in most of Orange and LA County markets that I've been doing valuations in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yes.
And like I said, there's many factors to it. I just touched up on a couple of them, but the interest rates, as low as they are, they're still kind of keeping it from just being a complete disaster in the high end, but it's still not enough to really show a decline in those high end homes. And like I said, depending on which neighborhood, which city you're looking at, that kind of mid-range market, $1.25 million, $1.5 million to around $2 million, that's kind of holding okay. And like I said, $1.25 million and down, in many areas it's going up, surprisingly.
Yes. I've seen where they have bidding wars, in that price range, and sometimes it exceeds the appraisal,
Oh yeah.
Yes. And then of course they decide, well, we'll split the difference, from the appraisal and the accepted offer. So yeah, but that happens a lot. It's happening a lot right now, actually.
What one client of mine, she said that she thinks this is happening because people are, the bidding wars, because people aren't working in offices anymore. So people are moving from their they're not coming to the office anymore. So they're either selling or closing their offices, and they're buying homes closer to where their office is. Like, let's say your office is in, LA, and before you lived in, I don't know, you lived in like Sherman Oaks. So your office in LA maybe is closed, but you still want to be kind of close to that. So maybe you'll be looking to buy a home near downtown area, and you can maybe get a little bit nicer home than you had before, or the same kind of home, but you can still be close to where your work was. So depending on what industry you're working in, maybe it's still beneficial for you to be in that area. So a lot of people are buying homes in those areas where their offices were, so they can be close to, wherever their office was. Sure. And, to them, it still makes financial sense to buy in that area. So, that was one explanation provided to me by a real estate agent I worked with for years. And, I think there's something to that, but I think there's many, many reasons why the low end market is going up.
Yeah, there are different variables to that, but wow. I really enjoyed your visit, John. And before I let you go, give us your website and phone number for our listenership to contact you.
Yeah. So again, our company is North Star Appraisal Services. It's www.northstarappraiser, APPRAISER.com. Our number is direct phone number to me is 949-231-7989. We're on Yelp and we're on Home Advisor. Just if you're looking on Yelp, just put in North Star Appraisal Services or North Star Appraisal in Costa Mesa, and you'll see our Yelp page with all our reviews and happy customers, and similar for Home Advisor. Just type in North Star Appraisal on the Home Advisor site, so you can see all the testimonials from prior clients and get some pricing information as well.
Very good. Love that name though, North Star. I really do. That's a good metaphor. And so I thank you, my friend, for spending some time with us, and enjoy the rest of your day, John.
And thank you. You as well, Ben.
Hey, listeners, if you have a specific topic you want to discuss that is germane to the real estate industry, drop me a note at yourlotandparcel.com. And now, if you will excuse me.
This program has been produced by Isaac Diaz with music by Echo Foxtone. All the opinions expressed in this podcast are opinions only and should not be relied on. For more information, please visit the website yourlotandparcel.com.